Hi there, and welcome to Naturally Recovering Autism. I am your host, Karen Thomas, and I want to thank you so much for being here and being a proactive parent and getting the resources that you need to let your child live their most fulfilling and independent life possible. When my own son was diagnosed with autism, I was told to drug him and try behavioral therapies, and there was nothing else that we could do for him but manage his symptoms the rest of his life. But I didn't want to do that. Fortunately, my background in craniosacral therapy of now 30 years let me know that the brain can and does heal, but I didn't know that much about autism. What I did know is that I didn't want to just mask the symptoms with dangerous drugs. I wanted to find the causes and work with them naturally. And fast forward, it took me a decade and a lot of time and effort, but today my son is no longer diagnosable with autism after being told it could not happen. So I'm here to share with you valuable resources to save you the time and some of the expense that I had to spend to figure it out, and to help you let your child lead to their best results possible. Every child's level of recovery is different, but we know that children who couldn't sleep through the night are sleeping now through the night and happily. Their immune systems are now strong where they were once sick all the time. Children who were nonverbal and their parents were told they could never speak are now speaking. Children who were getting D's and F's in school are getting A's and B's. And those that were so anxious all the time and couldn't sit still and were uncomfortable in their own bodies are now calm and happy and relaxed. And they're leading fulfilling and independent lives with friends. This is what we want for our kids. So I'm here to share the resources with you so that you can get the best results for your child, the best possible. And you can start that right now with my free download of the top 7 foods to eliminate beginning today, of the top foods that are the most inflammatory and toxic that are contributing to those physical and behavioral symptoms of autism that your child is having. They're making his life uncomfortable. So you can get that right now at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/7 foods. And feel free to share that with anybody you know who would be interested. And I will also link to it in today's show notes. There's, of course, a lot more than diet, but this is something you could start doing today that will begin to reduce those symptoms. And I'm happy to share everything I can with you. So right now, let's dive into today's episode. Hi there, and again, welcome. Thank you so much for being here and doing what you're doing for your children. I have some valuable information to share with you today on adrenal fatigue. I know not only for our children, but as parents of children with autism, that we are really, really challenged a lot of the time internally by not only our own toxic overload and other things we have going on, but the stressors involved in the challenges our children have. And so this episode is for both parents, entire family members, and of course your child with autism. So please take note of these. The episode notes will be at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/165. This is episode 165, and there will be some links for you, or some key pieces that I think will be very helpful. So anyway, let's get into it. So adrenal fatigue, what really is that? So stress can lead to weakened adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are the glands that really take on the stressors in our body, and they can lead to excessive fatigue. It can also mean trouble thinking clearly and being able to focus. So for your child, starting a new school year has multiple stressors involved, but especially those for children with autism. So anytime they start something new, or you're traveling or doing anything different than their usual routine, they can have additional stress. But it's also really common for children on the autism spectrum to have elevated adrenal hormones, otherwise known as cortisol, due to the internal stress from inflammation that their toxic overload, the co-infections in their body, and the pathogens have on multiple systems of their body, including, of course, their brain. There are also a lot of outside stressors from sensory overload, not being able to do what they want to, lack of speech or poor communication abilities, poor sleep, and all of the other challenges that they work with daily. There's a lot of frustration that is stressful for them. And for you as a parent, again, too. So it's never just one thing that causes a problem or a symptom. Just remember that It's multiple things. So it's important to work with all of the triggers from A to Z, and it will help the adrenals too, but we can support them further as we work with these underlying causes. So, symptoms of cortisol imbalance to look for: the stress response, when overburdened, creates many health and behavioral issues. Symptoms are manifestation of what's happening in the body. Cortisol affects our sleep, our energy levels, our immune system, our mood, including aggressive issues, irritability, hormone issues, brain, memory, weight, blood sugar, food digestion, and the thyroid, which we're going to talk about a little later as well. So, some common causes of adrenal fatigue that need to be balanced are high inflammatory foods. So, again, if you haven't gotten my free food guide to the top 7 foods to eliminate that are extremely inflammatory, cause damage to the intestinal lining, inflaming not only the gut, but the brain, and also causing adrenal overload, then please be sure to get that. The link again is always on the show notes, and it's at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/7foods. Histamines are also a really big trigger, and this is very commonly hereditary. So mom and dad may have histamine sensitivities, and we want to reduce the high histamine foods, fermented foods, leftovers, especially protein sources like meats and poultry, aged foods. But there are also environmental histamine triggers, including chlorine is a big one. So we think of it as chlorine from swimming pools most of the time as the main source, but we are usually bathing and drinking chlorine from our tap water. So make sure that you always are using a very high quality water filter. And I will link to one in the show notes for you so you have an idea for one, because they're not all the same. There's some really bad ones out there. But you can also put a filter on your shower as well, because that steam is opening up our pores, and it's also allowing the chlorine to absorb into our pores as well. But as you've heard me talk about many times in episodes I've done with water experts here, which you can also, I'll link to as well. But those are also important to know because the dangers in drinking water. So we're getting a lot of toxins, a lot of heavy metal toxicity, especially as well, and a lot of different other things in tap water. So you want to make sure you're using a very high quality filter. Another thing that can be a stressor on the body, of course, is leaky gut. If we don't heal up the lining of the gut that allows these undigested foods into the bloodstream, so the immune system then reacts to them, then keeping this happening. So we have these ongoing triggers, and the gut lining has many reasons why it has holes in it. Candida, for one, bores holes in the lining of the gut. The inflammatory foods that I mentioned, I have the food guide to help you eliminate those, because you don't want to, again, weaken that gut lining with those inflammatory foods, causing more leaky gut. There's also parasitic issues that are common in children with autism. Glyphosate, which is in Roundup weed killer, and also sprayed on the majority of our food crops. And it's water soluble. So yes, it is in tap water. Mold biotoxins are another one from water damaged building, causing a lot of internal like a cascade basically of inflammation in the body. And then Lyme disease, which is also very common, as you know, in children with autism. It is one of the underlying co-infections, and they mimic the symptoms of autism. So remember that too. So we don't get to the core issues of all of these pieces, then these triggers will keep happening. You've probably heard of the MTHFR gene mutation, and this is really, really common in children with autism. In fact, I'm finding it most common with most people these days in general, due to our toxic world, toxic overload. And this gene mutation can happen when an ill gut blocks methylation. So the ill gut, again, is where we begin all of the processes. Of course, I call it stage 1 in my 4-stage process. But you really want to start healing up the gut properly. And that starts with the diet. Of course, diet's not everything, but it is a huge component. So an ill gut blocks methylation, the MTHFR. And basically, that MTHFR gene mutation also disrupts the body's ability to make the master antioxidant glutathione. And when the body cannot detoxify properly, the toxins build up in the body and they cause a myriad of health problems. So basically, the MTHFR gene mutation means your body's not properly detoxifying. And we work with everything here as well for that. But just know that that is something that can be repaired. It's called epigenetics, and you can reverse some genetic issues. And that is one that has a lot of underlying triggers, such as all of these inflammation and co-infection and pathogen issues. Electromagnetic field radiation, or EMFs, as they're usually termed, are very, very triggering to a lot of things in the body. One can be something called mast cell activation, triggering more inflammation in the body. And it can also cause the pathogens in our body to thrive and weaken our immune system. So it's really important to turn off Wi-Fi at night and place protection on yourself and your home. I'm going to give you a really good resource and an interview I've done with some experts on this. But they link to a product that I think is excellent, and they give a 14-day free trial with no credit card required or questions asked. And you can see any difference you might notice in your home, in the people in your home, and of course, your child with autism. The link is naturallyrecoveringautism.com/safe. And I will link to that, of course, in the show notes as well. And again, I'll link to the podcast interview I've done with that. Another trigger is Lyme disease, as I already mentioned. And another one is PANS, Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Syndrome. PANS is an acronym, and basically it's an autoimmune issue. And that autoimmune issue makes the immune system start attacking the brain. And you see extreme levels of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, fearfulness, clinginess, and a lot of like increased stimming, dilated pupils. So look for those things as well. Mold biotoxins, I already mentioned. Mercury toxicity is huge. Heavy metal toxins are such a big deal with our kids, and we've got to safely and naturally get them out. Candida overgrowth, again, is another trigger, parasites, and of course, stress. So calming exercises and treating underlying emotional trauma with things that can actually reach the subconscious level patterns are really, really helpful to work with. And emotion code work I have found to be tremendously helpful. And it's such a simple thing to do. And I linked to the show note page that I did with the person who actually created the emotion code work, and Dr. Bradley Nelson, and he's really wonderful. And there is a link on that page where you can find a practitioner anywhere in the world, because it's so simple. It can be done virtually online. So you don't have to take your child to an appointment. They don't even have to directly be there interacting during the appointment, because I know a lot of kids aren't able to do that. So that helps simplify it, and it helps you not have to, be trying to get them to one more appointment, because we have enough appointments and therapies and things that we deal with already. There is a way to muscle test for adrenal fatigue, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes how that can be done, because it's got a few little steps to it, but it's actually very, very simple. So I just wanted to let you know that that is something that you can do. And again, the show notes will have those steps in it for you. But one way that a lot of people do it also is the saliva testing for adrenal. Now, if you'd like, again, to do further testing, usually you can know that your child does have adrenal overload. It is just going to be extremely common from the internal stressors of all the toxins and pathogens, and the external stressors of the things that I mentioned, again, that they deal with, and their anxiousness alone can cause it. So you don't have to spend the money on testing. There are some simple supplements and various things that we can do to help reduce the overload, and working, of course, with all of these co-infections and pathogens to reduce them and eventually eliminate them from the body is key. And working with the diet, reducing a lot of the triggers are so, so important. But if you wanted to do some saliva testing, it is the best way, much, much more efficient than blood testing, because basically there's a company called Diagnostics Laboratories, and I'll link to them in the show notes. But they measure your stress hormone or cortisol levels at 4 different increments during the day. So this test can be done at home or at work. Most practitioners, natural practitioners, carry it in their office, but any of them can order it for you very easily. Diagnostics is a very large and well-known and highly reputable company. But know that the saliva test and these doing it at 4 different increments during the day is much more effective and efficient and accurate than blood testing. Up to from 92 to 96% most accurate, and it's less invasive than a blood draw. So, and it's much more affordable too. And I always find blood draws to be very traumatic for kids. Most conventional doctors will measure blood or urine, which only gives 1 time increment and is far less accurate than saliva testing. Blood tests often allow for false results. So to read more in-depth information on saliva testing, I'll link to the Diagnostics page, their website for you. And again, a natural practitioner or any practitioner can order the test for you if they don't have one already in their office. One more added benefit of the Diagnostics cortisol saliva test is that it will give you a reading of your gluten tolerance levels. This is automatically added to this test many years ago, as it became apparent that so many people were having elevated cortisol levels and adrenal fatigue due to their bodies reacting to gluten intolerance stressors. So please, if you didn't hear that, I'm going to repeat it. Diagnostics cortisol saliva test added gluten tolerance levels to the testing many years ago because it was so apparent that so many people were having elevated cortisol levels and adrenal fatigue due to their bodies reacting to gluten intolerance stressors. So remember, I've done show episodes before on gluten and helping you understand why it really, really needs to be eliminated from the body. And one of the main foods that should be avoided are gluten-sourced foods. So this is one of the big reasons why. It's very, very inflammatory, and it's, of course, causing a lot of stress on the adrenal glands. This is now, again, a 2-in-1 test. So gluten again, is the protein in wheat, but you'll notice that you're going to get that reading if in that saliva test. But I can tell you also right now, yes, your child is gluten intolerant. We all pretty much are at this point. Some of us just notice the effects of it much more easily and drastically than others that don't understand why they might be feeling fatigued, or they've got a headache, or their stomach's bothering them, but they don't know why, or they can't think clearly, but they don't know why. And they're craving wheat and those kinds of products because they actually have addictive properties in them, including opiates that they create in the body. So before I get too skewed off subject here, when the body doesn't properly break down proteins in wheat and dairy, it creates these opiates. And among the many issues that arise from this are the reduction in the brain's ability to focus, anxiety, irritability, stomach aches, and headaches. What you can do for weak adrenals. Of course, you must be working on all of the underlying health issues we've already talked about, but additional assistance can come from some of the options I'm going to mention here. And I'll link to things on the show notes page again. Although, the diet is not an option, of course, it is essential. And you can get my free, food guide to the top 7 foods to eliminate, which I've already mentioned. Another one are at-home allergy vials. They're really easy to use. You order them online, and I'll give the link to where you get them from. They're not used up, so you can use them on all family members, and you can use them multiple times. And I've done an interview with the owner of that company and who created them. You order them and you do them at home on your child. They're super simple. And there is one specifically called thyroid adrenal hormones. So you can order that individually, or you can also get the autism allergy kit. But want you to know they can be ordered individually, and there is one for thyroid adrenal hormones. That's one vial with those three names in it. And you can just type it into the search bar on the site for the link I give you. I also suggest the anxiety vial and the stress vial, which also target these internal reactions and reduce triggered symptoms. And those, again, you'll find when you go to the link on the show notes page, it'll take you to where you'll learn more about those. The adaptogenic herbs ashwagandha and holy basil can also be really helpful to calm, especially in the evening before bedtime. There is an allergy relief elixir that I will link to in the show notes too, and it tells the body to reduce allergy symptoms and autoimmune responses. More importantly, it turns off three responses of the immune system that inappropriately call allergic and autoimmune responses to develop. Histamine levels are reduced to low to normal levels, and the functioning of all glands involved is optimized so that allergic and autoimmune patterns of response are reduced and eventually even can be eliminated. Another product that is hugely beneficial, and I've talked about this especially in mitochondria episodes, is CoQ10 or ubiquinol. It can help increase energy production in the body all the way down to the cellular level, which then helps the body to be able to function more easily and reduces internal stress. Another one is the product Drenamine from Standard Process. One pill, maybe 3 times a day, is often helpful. It's a food source of a product, and it's also in a very easy to crush pill form. So you can crush it up and add it to any food or beverage that your child might take as well. Another option, and these are all options, not that you need to do all of them, but another option is there's Undas. If you haven't heard of this one, Ribes nigrum, it's a liquid, a homeopathic remedy that actually assists the adrenals. And much lesser known is Himalayan sea salt. Of course, not white salt, not iodized salt, but Himalayan sea salt. And you'll actually see it has color, usually a pink color to it, the good quality one. And mineral salts can be very helpful for the adrenal glands. So just a tiny pinch in the morning can really be helpful, and maybe in the afternoon if you're needing a little bit of an uplift. You don't need a whole lot of it, just a little pinch. And when the adrenals are taxed, then the thyroid is directly affected because the adrenals and the thyroid work together. So when one is disturbed, so is the other. So I am going to do the next episode following this one. The next new episode will be on thyroid function and things that you can learn to help with that, because it is very, very important, especially with extreme fatigue, can be low thyroid, and kind of a hyperactivity or overreaction anxiousness can sometimes be hyperthyroid. But we want to know what we can do to balance them naturally and know that the adrenal function is a big part of that. So again, the show notes today will be at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/165. I hope this was helpful for you. And I encourage parents, please, to be utilizing this episode for yourself, because under those challenges that you're working with, we know being a parent is hard enough, but being a parent of a child with autism has additional challenges. And it's very important that you support yourself as well on this journey. I hope it's helpful, and I will see you soon.